points out lots of them die really quite young. Of course, at the time, the medical system was still, let's bleed this person to make them healthy, kind of, so it's not necessarily really one of the best times to live medically. But I highly recommend this book, and she's written, by the way, an earlier book. This was the second one. The first one was The Invention of Nature. This is The Invention of Self. The Invention of Nature, which she wrote, is about Alexander von Humboldt. Andrea Wolff is her name, by the way. And as you can see, The Invention of Nature is one of her others. And Alexander von Humboldt is part of that group. So his Explorer is actually part of that same kind of romantic movement. And what this book highlights is how we think of today, we think of nature as one system throughout the world. The tides are all part of, the air is all part, we understand all that now. Well, before this period, we didn't. We thought, it's an absolutely silly thing. Find it. It's just 2 minutes, so I'll play it.
Thanks for coming in.
It's a great pleasure, thank you.
This ship that was involved in the incident off Western Australia this week.
Yeah, the one the front fell off.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not very typical. I'd like to make that point.
Well, how is it untypical?
Well, there are a lot of these ships going around the world all the time, and very seldom does anything like this happen. I just don't want people thinking that tankers aren't safe.
Is this tanker safe?
Well, I was thinking more about the other ones.
The ones that are safe?
Yeah, the ones the front doesn't fall off.
Well, if this wasn't safe, why did it have 80,000 tonnes of oil on it?
Well, I'm not saying it wasn't safe. It's just perhaps not quite as safe as some of the other ones.
Why?
Well, some of them are built so the front doesn't fall off at all.
Well, wasn't this built so the front wouldn't fall
Well,
off?
obviously not.
How do you know?
Well, because the front fell off and 20,000 tonnes of crude oil spilled into the sea caught fire. It's a bit of a giveaway. I just like to make the point that that is not normal.
Well, what sort of standards are these oil tankers built to?
Oh, very rigorous maritime engineering standards.
What sort of thing?
Well, the front's not supposed to fall off for a start.
What other things?
Well, there are regulations governing the materials that they can be made of.
What materials?
Well, cardboard's out.
And?
No cardboard derivatives.
Like paper?
No paper. No string. No sellotape.
Rubber?
No, rubber's out. They've got to have a steering wheel. There's a minimum crew requirement.
What's the minimum crew?
Oh, one, I suppose.
So the allegations that they're just designed to carry as much oil as possible,
Oh,
they're all the
ludicrous.
consequences. I mean, that's ludicrous.
Absolutely ludicrous. These are very, very strong vessels.
So what happened in this case?
Well, the front fell off in this case by all means, but it's very unusual.
But Senator Collins, why did the front book fall off?
Well, a wave hit it.
The wave hit it?
A wave hit the ship.
Is that unusual?
Oh, yeah. At sea, chance for millions.
So what do you do to protect the environment in cases
Well,
like
the
this?
ship was towed outside the environment.
Into another environment?
No, it's been towed beyond the environment. It's
Yes,
not in the
into-
environment.
No, but from one environment to another environment.
No, it's beyond the environment. It's not in an environment. It has
Well, there
been
must be
towed
something.
beyond the environment.
Well, what's out there?
Nothing's out
Well, there
there.
must be something.
There is nothing out there. All there is sea and birds and fish
And?
and 20,000 tonnes of crude oil
And what else?
and a fire
And anything else?
and the part of the ship that the front fell off. But there's nothing else out there.
Senator Collins, thanks
It's
for
a
joining us.
complete void.
Yeah, we're out of
The
time.
environment's perfectly safe. We're out of time?
Yeah.
Can you book me a cab? Yeah.
Was that a parody or like?
Was that a bit or was that an actual?
That was a bit.
Okay.
That was a bit.
There's a lady who does something like that.
Camellia Funk.
Something like yeah.
Punk. Yeah.
Punk on Earth.
Punk on Earth.
Yeah.
I love that show so much.
She's so good.
He was
Well,
living.
but
You should look that one up.
we think that's funny because we don't think the environment ends like at the reef. No, it's obviously the whole system. And so the invention of nature, it's a real thing. Let me get rid of some of these folks now. Shelling. So Fichte gives us the Ich and says it's the self that structures things. Well, it's pretty obvious that that's not really going to work. And even though it was an excitement and there was, for maybe 10 years in Germany, this was like the thrill and everybody was writing, books and things about, the focus on the self. but it didn't really work. And then Schelling comes along. This is a young man, and I should mention that Schelling was a roommate with Hegel at Tübingen, along with a poet named Hölderlin, the famous German poet. So you imagine in basically college, these three young men were roommates at Tübingen, the Tübingen Stift, which is a seminary where the three of them went, and so it's kind of neat. I ended up with, well, that's okay. So Schelling was the youngest, actually, of the three of them, and became famous first. And by the way, it's really neat reading Andrea Wolf's book, because I didn't know a lot of what she researched and discovered about Schelling and his relationship with Caroline, who he married. He's the last one to marry her, because she died while he was still married to her. And by the way, after she died, he waited for a while and then married a younger woman, and he actually had children with the younger woman, etc. But it was fascinating seeing Schelling's development through the letters of the women and the group that he was a part of and everything, and how that tied into the development of his philosophy, which was very much like Alexander von Humboldt's, and that is that it's not the Ich that structures our experience, it's nature. And by the way, Schelling today is experiencing kind of a popular comeback, because a lot of his books are really into the importance of nature, not just nature in the sense of the complete system of the earth, but instead of being out in the forest, how good it is for you, how important it is for us to experience those kinds of things, how healthy it is for us, and so on. Schelling was doing that and became really important until Hegel came along. And even though they were both roommates and friends, when Hegel, his first couple of books actually were supporting Schelling. In fact, one of the first ones he wrote was the differences between Schelling's and Fichte's systems, because there were, of course, unkind feelings between them, you know, as Fichte discovered Schelling was outdoing him, he got upset, and Hegel came in on Schelling's side on that. But then Hegel finally printed his book in 1804, and that's where my quiz question comes up. You get rid of this. So my quiz question, oops, where am I? There we go. So the first quiz question is, what do you think Hegel means by Weltgeist? And who was the Weltgeist on a white horse? And who was that? Anybody know offhand?
Oh, yeah.
I should be able to just find the, yeah, here.
You consider Napoleon a world historical figure.
Oh, he was.
Yeah.
He was the emperor.
Well, yeah, but
remember the
thing
French
is Hegel's-
Revolution
yeah, but
was
Hegel's
very.
To like a world historical figures where like everything that an epoch was sort of leading up to is summed up within a single
Right,
individual.
right.
You know?
And so the theory, we also refer to it as the great man theory. It actually could be the great woman theory too. It's just waiting for your turn.
I mean, I guess you can consider the great man theory derivative, but in this case, I think Hegel's referring to a specific kind of great man. You know?
But I'm pretty sure that Hegel actually greeting Napoleon as he's riding by on a white horse is fictitious. Hegel was upstairs in his window when he saw Napoleon ride by on his white horse to the battle, reconnaissance on the Battle of Jena, which, by the way, destroyed Jena and the university where Hegel was teaching. But famously, and the reason I think in the picture he's got this book under his arm is because that's him sending the book off by the post office to the publisher, the second half, and it made it. Despite the battle all around, the book got to the post office made it, delivered, and the book got published. So he finished it just in the nick of time, actually. But what was this book all about? And we have, this is actually the best copy, I think, in English. There's multiple translators, as you can imagine, but this one is by Miller. And so what goes on in this book? And this is a very famous book, especially the one part with the master-slave, which was what Ellie was talking about in that video, by the way. This is really his answer to Kant's structural problem. How do we get structure? And what I would say is it's today what we call the social construction of reality, right? So that's the way we phrase it now, although I believe that came from Peter Berger and Thomas Luckman in their book Social Construction of Reality. But, I mean, this is just a wonderful way to look at how it works. And by the way, since this came out in 1967, 68, it shows that this philosophical approach keeps improving. We improve with it. But so what does phenomenology mean? Remember, phenomena is what they're calling our sense experience, our awareness of things. We call it phenomena. And so it's the study of the phenomena of spirit. Well, what is spirit? And remember, since Berkeley, I've been arguing with Berkeley, Leibniz, and still now with Hegel, that spirit is really closer to what today we would call energy. So when we think in terms of Einstein's dichotomy, instead of spirit and matter, we now have mass and energy, right? And in fact, thanks to the physicists today, we know that mass is actually energy in an arrangement, right? And so the conflict that we have with how can spirit know matter, because they're two totally different things, that problem goes away because mass is energy in an arrangement, and energy, our souls are energy as well, our spirits are energy, and so our energy interacts with the energy of the energy that makes up the material world. So there's no weird conceptual problem in our minds with how we can interact with everything that we do. But the question, of course, is how does this all structure reality? And this is where Hegel gives us the study of this phenomena, and how does it become energy or spirit? And even if we're thinking of ourselves as an individual Geist, and by the way, the Weltgeist just means the world spirit or world soul. Geist, ghost, you say ghost, right? So this is a German word. My thesis, by the way, in college was Hegel's Geist. You know, what are the things that his Geist, the concept of Geist in German could mean. He starts off with a consciousness. So we start off with consciousness, and gosh, we still argue over what consciousness is. Conscious means with science, right? Science. consciousness, or even if your conscience, makes you worried. Both of those words really come from the same word, really, and so it's with science, and science is knowledge. Right? The translation of matha or mathematics in Greek, math is Greek for science, and science is Latin for knowledge. And we of course have lots of different sciences. The science of well, you can name them. All of them. We call them sciences. They're knowledge. So with knowledge means something that is aware. And today we would argue